Mom-in-law gets mistaken for bride. She wanted his money. He wanted love. Her mother wanted the truth. This collision course ends in pure chaos. Watch as Carol's secret kiss with her coach blows up her engagement when her own mom drops the mic at the proposal. But Carol's vicious sauna accusation? That's where it gets wild. See why her dad stands firm after 30 years. And just when you think it's over, the rejected fiancé drops a life-changing Bitcoin bomb on the mother who saved him. Greed exposed. Loyalty rewarded. Revenge served generous. Hey, story lover. Welcome to the Narrative Hub, Reddit Stories. Believe me, this adventure gets wild, but it's only epic with you. Seriously, you make this possible. Want more stories? Greater adventure? Smash subscribe right now. Smash like. Comment below. Let's go. But let me start from the beginning, because this story has more twists than a pretzel factory, and trust me, you're going to want to hear every single detail. Carol Black had it all figured out. At 28, she was stunning, sophisticated, and smart enough to know that love didn't pay the bills, but Monet Morrison's trust fund sure would. Monet wasn't just wealthy, he was generationally wealthy. The kind of wealthy where his weekend house had a weekend house. Carol met him at an exclusive country club where she'd been working as a swimming instructor, not because she needed the job, but because it put her in proximity to exactly the kind of men she was hunting for. Rich, lonely, and looking for someone genuine. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was the least genuine person in any room. Monet was different from the usual trust fund babies she'd encountered. He was kind, thoughtful, and actually seemed interested in building something real. He'd grown up with money, but had never let it corrupt his heart. He volunteered at local charities, funded scholarships for underprivileged kids, and treated everyone from CEOs to janitors with the same respect. Unfortunately for Monet, Carol saw his kindness as weakness and his generosity as proof of how much money he had to throw around. Their courtship was a carefully orchestrated performance on Carol's part. She played the role of the sweet, down-to-earth girl who was intimidated by his wealth and just wanted to be sure he liked her for who she really was. It was Oscar-worthy acting, complete with fake hesitations about expensive gifts and staged conversations about wanting to take things slow. But Carol had one problem, a big, muscular, devastatingly handsome problem named Admire. Admire Santos was Carol's swimming coach, and he was everything Monet wasn't. Where Monet was gentle and thoughtful, Admire was intense and passionate. Where Monet talked about their future, Admire made Carol forget there was a future beyond the next kiss. The affair had started innocently enough: extra training sessions, lingering touches while correcting her stroke technique, meaningful glances across the pool. But innocent quickly became intense, and intense became impossible to ignore. Carol told herself it was just physical. Admire was her outlet, her rebellion against the careful, calculated life she was building with Monet. She could have her cake and eat it too, marry the millionaire, keep the passionate lover on the side. What could go wrong? Everything, as it turned out. Mrs. Eleanor Black had raised 3 daughters, survived a recession, and built a marriage that had lasted 30 years. She hadn't done all that by being naive. From the moment Carol introduced Monet, Mrs. Black knew something was off about her daughter's sudden transformation into the perfect girlfriend. Carol had never been the type to gush about anyone, yet here she was, constantly praising Monet's amazing heart and generous spirit. Mrs. Black noticed how Carol's eyes lit up when Monet mentioned his investments, but seemed to glaze over when he talked about his hobbies or dreams. Still, Mrs. Black tried to give her daughter the benefit of the doubt. Maybe Carol was finally maturing. Maybe she was learning to appreciate the finer things in a man beyond just good looks and charm. Maybe this Monet fellow was exactly what Carol needed to settle down. Those hopes were shattered on a Tuesday afternoon when Mrs. Black decided to surprise Carol with lunch at the country club. She arrived just as Carol's swimming lesson was ending and decided to wait by the pool area. That's when she saw them, Carol and Admire, in what was definitely not a professional coaching moment. They were pressed against the pool equipment shed, completely lost in each other, his hands tangled in her hair, her body molded against his. Mrs. Black stood frozen, watching her daughter kiss another man with more passion than she'd ever shown Monet, just 3 weeks before her engagement party. The betrayal cut deep, but what hurt even more was the realization of what this meant. Carol wasn't just cheating, she was about to destroy a good man's life for money. The engagement party was scheduled for the following weekend at the Grand Meridian Hotel, one of the city's most prestigious venues. Monet had spared no expense, flying in Carol's favorite flowers from Ecuador and hiring a string quartet that usually played for royalty. The night before the party, Monet had invited the Black family to stay at the hotel as his guests. The presidential suite came with access to the private spa facilities, and after a long day of party preparations, everyone was looking forward to unwinding. Mrs. Black decided to check out the steam room around 10 p.m., thinking most people would be asleep or in their rooms by then. She wrapped herself in one of the plush hotel robes and made her way down to the spa level. The steam was thick when she entered, and visibility was near zero. She settled onto one of the benches and closed her eyes, trying to process what she'd witnessed at the pool and figure out what to do about it. That's when she heard someone else enter. "Carol," came Monet's voice through the steam. "Is that you, sweetheart?" Before Mrs. Black could respond, she felt someone sit beside her on the bench. The steam was so thick that Monet couldn't see clearly, and Mrs. Black, startled and not wanting to embarrass him, froze. "I've been looking for you everywhere," Monet continued, his voice soft with affection. "Tomorrow's going to be perfect. I can't wait to make you my wife." In the dim, steamy atmosphere, Monet reached out and found what he thought was Carol's hand. Mrs. Black, still frozen with awkwardness, didn't pull away fast enough. "You know what I love most about you?" Monet said, and before Mrs. Black could stop him, he leaned over and gave her what he intended as a sweet, brief kiss on the cheek. Except the steam and the darkness conspired against them both. What should have been a simple peck on the cheek became a moment of lips meeting lips as Mrs. Black turned her head at exactly the wrong moment. They both jerked apart immediately. "Oh my God," Monet gasped, finally recognizing his mistake as the steam cleared slightly. "Mrs. Black, I'm so sorry. I thought you were the steam, I couldn't see." "It's fine," Mrs. Black said quickly, her face burning with embarrassment. "It was just a misunderstanding. The steam, the darkness, anyone could have made the same mistake." "Please don't tell Carol," Monet said, mortified. "She might misunderstand. It was completely innocent." Of course, Mrs. Black agreed, though she was thinking that Carol was the last person who had any right to judge anyone's innocent mistakes. What neither of them knew was that the Grand Meridian state-of-the-art security system included cameras in all common areas, including the spa. And what neither of them knew was that Carol had access to those cameras. Carol had requested access to the hotel's security feed ostensibly for safety reasons. She wanted to make sure the venue was secure for their high-profile guest list. In reality, she was paranoid about photographers or gossip bloggers trying to sneak pictures of the event. She was reviewing the footage the next morning when she saw it, her mother and her fiancé in what looked, from the camera's angle and without context, like a romantic encounter. The timestamp showed 10:17 p.m. The footage showed two figures entering the steam room separately, sitting close together on the bench, holding hands, and sharing what appeared to be a passionate kiss before quickly separating. Carol's mind raced. This was either a disaster or a gift from the universe. She knew it was probably innocent. Her mother wasn't the type to seduce anyone, much less her daughter's fiancé. But the footage looked damning, and Carol suddenly realized she was holding the perfect insurance policy. If her mother tried to expose her affair with Admire, Carol could retaliate with this. It was mutually assured destruction, and Carol was counting on her mother being too mortified to risk the accusation. Mrs. Black spent the morning of the engagement party wrestling with her conscience. She'd barely slept, going back and forth between confronting Carol privately or staying silent and hoping her daughter would come to her senses on her own. Finally, she decided she couldn't let Monet walk into a marriage built on lies. She found Carol in the bridal suite, being pampered by a team of stylists and makeup artists. Carol looked radiant, every inch the perfect bride-to-be. "Carol, sweetheart, I need to speak with you privately," Mrs. Black said. Carol dismissed the stylists with a wave. "What's wrong, Mom? You look nervous." "Carol, I saw you with Admire. At the pool. I know about the affair." Carol's hand froze halfway to her lipstick. For a moment, her mask slipped, and Mrs. Black saw panic flash across her daughter's face. But it was quickly replaced by defiance. "I don't know what you think you saw. I saw you kissing him, Carol." Passionately. "This isn't some misunderstanding." Carol set down her lipstick and turned to face her mother fully. "It was one kiss, Mom. One moment of weakness. It doesn't mean anything." "One kiss that happened 3 weeks before your engagement party? Carol, you're about to marry a good man who loves you, and you're carrying on with another man behind his back." "It's not what you think," Carol said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Admire and it's complicated." "No, it's not complicated at all. It's betrayal." Carol's eyes hardened. "And what would you know about betrayal, Mom? You've been married to Dad for 30 years. You've never been tempted by anything." "That's not true, and that's not the point. The point is that you're about to make vows you have no intention of keeping to a man who deserves better." "Deserves better?" Carol laughed bitterly. "Mom, wake up. This isn't some fairy tale romance. This is real life. Monet gets a beautiful wife who'll make him look good at social events and give him the family he wants. I get financial security and a comfortable life. It's a fair trade." Mrs. Black stared at her daughter in horror. "You don't love him at all, do you?" "Love doesn't pay for houses, Mom. Love doesn't fund retirement accounts or pay for medical emergencies. You and Dad can afford to be romantic because Dad's been steadily employed for 30 years. Some of us need to be more practical." "So you're going to marry him for his money while carrying on with Admire?" "I'm going to marry him, and whatever happens with Admire happens. Monet doesn't need to know every detail of my life." "Carol, I can't let you do this. If you won't tell him, I will." That's when Carol's expression turned cold. "No, Mom. You won't." "What's that supposed to mean?" Carol reached for her phone and pulled up the security footage. She turned the screen toward her mother. "It means you're in no position to be making moral judgments about anyone's behavior." Mrs. Black watched the footage in stunned silence. Even knowing the context, she had to admit it looked incriminating. "That was a misunderstanding," she said quietly. "A mistake in the steam. You know that." "Do I? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're trying to steal my fiancé. And if this footage got out..." Carol shrugged. "Well, I'm sure Dad would be very interested to see it." "You would destroy your own parents' marriage to cover up your affair?" "I would do whatever it takes to protect my future. The question is, are you going to force me to?" Mrs. Black looked at her daughter, really looked at her, and for the first time, she didn't recognize the person staring back at her. This wasn't the little girl she'd raised, the young woman she'd been so proud of. This was a stranger wearing her daughter's face. "What happened to you, Carol?" "I grew up, Mom. I learned how the world really works. And if you're smart, you'll stay quiet tonight and let me handle my own life." The engagement party was everything Monet had dreamed of. The Grand Meridian's ballroom was transformed into a garden paradise, with thousands of white roses and twinkling lights, creating an ethereal atmosphere. A jazz trio played softly in the corner while guests mingled, sampling champagne and delicate hors d'oeuvres. The guest list read like a who's who of the city's elite business leaders, philanthropists, socialites, and politicians. Monet's parents had flown in from Switzerland, where they were spending their retirement years. Carol's extended family filled several tables, all buzzing with excitement about their daughter's incredible catch. Monet had planned to propose during dinner, but as he watched Carol work the room, charming his business associates, laughing at his father's jokes, graciously accepting compliments from the other women, he felt so overwhelmed with love that he couldn't wait. He stood and tapped his champagne glass with a knife, the crystal ringing clearly through the ballroom. Conversation gradually died as all eyes turned to him. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate with Carol and me. Your presence means the world to us both. Carol turned toward him with a radiant smile, playing her part perfectly. She looked genuinely surprised, as if she had no idea what was coming. Carol, Monet continued, his voice thick with emotion, 6 months ago, you walked into my life and changed everything. You made me believe in love again. You made me want to be a better man. You made me understand what it means to find your other half. He dropped to one knee and the room erupted in excited murmurs. Carol gasped and covered her mouth with her hands, tears real or performed, springing to her eyes. Carol Elizabeth Black, will you marry me? The ring was spectacular, a 5-carat diamond surrounded by smaller stones, clearly worth more than most people's houses. Carol stared at it with genuine appreciation for its value before remembering to look overwhelmed by the gesture itself. Yes, she whispered, then louder, yes. Of course, yes. The room exploded in applause as Monet slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her deeply. It should have been the perfect moment. That's when Mrs. Black stood up. Excuse me, Mrs. Black said, her voice cutting through the celebration like a blade. I'm sorry, but I need to say something. The applause died abruptly. All eyes turned to Carol's mother, who stood ramrod straight beside her table, her face pale but determined. Mom, Carol said, warning clear in her voice, this isn't the time. No, sweetheart, this is exactly the time, Mrs. Black replied. She looked directly at Monet, who was still kneeling, confusion replacing the joy on his face. Monet, you're a good man, a kind man, and you deserve to know the truth before you make this commitment. Mom, sit down, Carol hissed, but Mrs. Black ignored her. The truth is that my daughter has been having an affair with her swimming coach. I saw them together myself just last week. She's not marrying you for love, Monet. She's marrying you for your money. The ballroom erupted in shocked gasps and murmurs. Monet slowly rose to his feet, his face draining of color. That's not true, Carol said quickly, but her voice shook. Mom, how could you? Because I can't stand by and watch you destroy this man's life for financial gain, Mrs. Black said. And I can't give my blessing to a marriage built on lies. Carol stood frozen for a moment, the weight of 100 stares pressing down on her. Then, something shifted in her expression. The mask of the sweet, loving bride fell away completely, replaced by something cold and calculating. You want to talk about the truth, Mom? Carol said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent ballroom. Let's talk about the truth. She pulled out her phone and connected it to the room's audiovisual system, a feature she'd insisted on for the slideshow presentation they'd planned for later in the evening. The truth is, Carol continued as the security footage began playing on the screens around the room, that my mother has been trying to seduce my fiancé. The room watched in stunned silence as the steam room footage played. Even in black and white, even without context, it looked damning. The timestamp was clear, the actions unmistakable. This was recorded last night at this very hotel, Carol announced. My own mother, attempting to steal my fiancé on the eve of our engagement. Mrs. Black stood in horrified silence, watching her innocent moment with Monet being twisted into something sordid. Around the room, Guests whispered among themselves, some looking scandalized, others merely confused. "That's not what happened," Mrs. Black said, but her voice was barely audible over the murmurs of the crowd. "Really?" Carol said. "Because it looks pretty clear to me. You went to the steam room at the same time as Monet. You sat close to him. You held his hand. You kissed him. What am I missing?" Monet, who had been watching the footage in shock, suddenly found his voice. "Carol, stop this. That's not what happened at all." "Oh, so you admit you were with my mother in the steam room?" "It was a mistake," Monet said. "A misunderstanding. The steam was so thick I couldn't see, and I thought she was you. Your mother and I both realized the mistake immediately." "How convenient," Carol said. "The man caught cheating with my mother claims it was all a big misunderstanding." That's when Mr. Harold Black, who had been silent through the entire exchange, slowly rose from his chair. He was a man of few words, but when he spoke, people listened. He'd built a successful accounting practice through decades of hard work and had a reputation for integrity that was unshakable. "Carol," he said, his voice quiet but carrying clearly through the now silent ballroom, "that's enough. Dad, you saw the footage. You saw what Mom—" "I saw a misunderstanding in a steam room," Mr. Black said firmly. "And I've known your mother for 30 years. I've seen her in every situation imaginable, good times, bad times. Stressful times, happy times. And in 30 years, she has never once been dishonest with me. She has never once betrayed my trust. She has never once done anything that would make me question her character." He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of the guests who were hanging on every word. "My wife is telling the truth about what happened in that steam room, and she's telling the truth about what she saw between my daughter and her swimming coach." The silence in the ballroom was deafening. "Carol," Mr. Black continued, "I love you. You're my daughter, and nothing will ever change that. But I will not stand by and watch you destroy your mother's reputation to cover up your own mistakes." Carol's face crumpled. For a moment, she looked like the little girl she used to be, desperate for her father's approval. But the moment passed, and her expression hardened again. "Fine," she said. "Choose her over me. Choose her over your own daughter's happiness." "I'm not choosing anyone over anyone," Mr. Black said sadly. "I'm choosing truth over lies. And I'm hoping that someday you'll understand the difference." All eyes turned to Monet, who had been standing in stunned silence through the entire exchange. He looked at Carol, beautiful, sophisticated Carol, who had seemed so perfect just moments before. Then he looked at Mrs. Black, who stood with quiet dignity despite having her most embarrassing moment broadcast to a room full of strangers. "Carol," he said finally, "is it true? About the swimming coach?" Carol's eyes darted around the room, looking for escape routes that didn't exist. "Monet, I can explain. Just answer the question. Are you having an affair?" The pause stretched for what felt like hours. "It was just one kiss," Carol said finally. "One moment of weakness. It doesn't mean anything." "One kiss that your mother saw a week ago?" "Yes, but—" "And instead of coming clean, instead of being honest with me, you decided to try to destroy your mother's reputation?" Carol's silence was answer enough. Monet reached out his hand. "I'll need the ring back." "Monet, please. We can work through this. People make mistakes. We can go to counseling, we can." "The ring, Carol." With shaking hands, Carol slipped off the enormous diamond and placed it in Monet's palm. He closed his fingers around it and put it in his pocket. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, addressing the room, "I apologize for the disruption to your evening. The engagement is off. Please enjoy the rest of the party as my guests." He turned to Mrs. Black, who was still standing beside her table, looking shell-shocked. "Mrs. Black, I owe you an enormous debt of gratitude. You saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life. And I owe you an apology for what happened in the steam room last night. It was completely innocent, but I understand how it must have looked. You don't owe me anything, Mrs. Black said quietly. I just couldn't let you marry her without knowing the truth. Actually, Monet said, I do owe you something. 3 days later, Mrs. Black received a package at her home. Inside was a letter and what appeared to be some kind of financial document. The letter read, Dear Mrs. Black, I've had time to think about what happened at the engagement party, and I keep coming back to the same conclusion. You are an extraordinary woman. You risked your relationship with your daughter to save me from a marriage that would have been built on lies. You stood up to public humiliation to tell the truth. You showed more integrity in one moment than most people show in a lifetime. I've done some research, and I know that you and your husband have been dreaming of opening a restaurant together when he retires next year. I know you've been saving for years, trying to put together enough capital to make that dream a reality. The enclosed document represents a transfer of $150,000 in Bitcoin to your account. This is not charity, this is gratitude. You gave me something priceless, the truth. This is my way of saying thank you. I hope your restaurant is everything you've dreamed it will be. With deepest appreciation, Monet Morrison. P.S. Your daughter called me 17 times yesterday asking for another chance. I want you to know that I harbor no ill will toward her, but I will not be taking her calls. Some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. Mrs. Black stared at the document in disbelief. $150,000. Enough to not just open their restaurant, but to do it right, with quality equipment, proper renovations, and enough operating capital to survive the difficult first year. She called her husband at work, her hands shaking as she dialed. Harold? Can you come home? There's something you need to see. Carol disappeared for a while after the engagement party. Some said she'd gone to stay with a friend in California. Others claimed she'd checked into a luxury spa resort to recover from the trauma. A few whispered that she'd actually moved in with Admire, though that rumor was never confirmed. The story of the engagement party spread through the city's social circles like wildfire, growing more dramatic with each retelling. Carol went from being the envy of every single woman in town to being a cautionary tale about the dangers of greed and deception. Monet, meanwhile, seemed to bounce back quickly. He was seen at charity events and social gatherings, always gracious when asked about the engagement, never speaking badly about Carol despite what she'd put him through. I learned something valuable, he told a friend who asked how he was handling the aftermath. I learned that sometimes the worst thing that can happen to you turns out to be the best thing that can happen to you. Better to know the truth before the wedding than after. 8 months later, Eleanor's Kitchen opened in the heart of the city's historic district. It was everything Mrs. Black had dreamed of: warm, welcoming, with the kind of home-style cooking that made people feel like family. Mr. Black had taken early retirement to help run the business, and they made a formidable team. She handled the creative side, menu development, recipe creation, the overall vision for the restaurant. He managed the business side, accounting, inventory, staff scheduling. The restaurant was an immediate success. Food critics raved about the authentic flavors and warm atmosphere. Customers became regulars, bringing their families and friends. The waiting list for weekend reservations stretched for weeks. On opening night, a beautiful bouquet of flowers arrived with a card that read, "Congratulations on making your dream a reality. A grateful friend." Mrs. Black never confirmed it publicly, but she strongly suspected she knew who had sent them. Carol returned to town about a year later, looking chastened and considerably less polished than when she'd left. The affair with Admire had apparently burned out quickly once the excitement of secrecy was gone, and she'd spent the intervening months working as a swimming instructor at a resort in Arizona, making a fraction of what she'd been accustomed to. She came to the restaurant on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, when the lunch rush was over and her parents were doing prep work for dinner service. "Hello, Mom. Dad." They looked up to see their daughter standing in the doorway, looking uncertain and younger than her years. "Carol," Mrs. Black said, setting down her knife. "You look different." "I feel different," Carol said. "Can we talk?" They sat at a corner table, the same one Mrs. Black had designated as the family table for occasions when relatives visited the restaurant. "I owe you both an apology," Carol began. "What I did at the engagement party was unforgivable. I tried to destroy Mom's reputation to save my own lies. I was willing to wreck your marriage to protect my secrets." She paused, struggling with the words. "I've had a lot of time to think about what kind of person I became, about what I was willing to do to get what I thought I wanted. And I'm ashamed." Mrs. Black reached across the table and took her daughter's hand. "We never stopped loving you, Carol. We were hurt and we were disappointed, but we never stopped loving you." "I know," Carol said, tears finally coming. "And that makes it worse somehow. I had parents who loved me unconditionally, and I was willing to throw that away for money." "What are you going to do now?" Mr. Black asked gently. "I don't know," Carol admitted. "I'm broke, I'm single, and I've burned most of my bridges in this town. But for the first time in years, I'm not scheming or planning or trying to figure out how to use people to get what I want. It's terrifying, but it's also liberating." "You can work here," Mrs. Black said suddenly, "if you want. It won't be glamorous, mostly washing dishes and prep work to start. And you'll have to earn back people's trust, including ours. But if you're serious about changing, about becoming the person we raised you to be, then we'll help you." Carol looked around the restaurant, at the mismatched chairs her parents had painted by hand, at the menu written in her mother's careful handwriting, at the family photos that lined the walls. "I'd like that," she said. "I'd like that very much." 2 years after the engagement party that shook the city's social scene, life had settled into new rhythms for everyone involved. Eleanor's Kitchen had become one of the most beloved restaurants in the city, known not just for its excellent food, but for the genuine warmth of its owners. Mrs. Black had been featured in the local newspaper's Local Heroes section, praised for her community involvement and mentorship of young entrepreneurs. Carol had worked her way up from dishwasher to prep cook to line cook, and was currently training to become a sous chef at a culinary institute downtown. She lived in a small apartment above a bookstore, drove a used Honda Civic, and had learned to find satisfaction in work well done rather than schemes well executed. She'd seen Monet around town a few times. They'd exchanged polite nods but never spoke. She'd heard through mutual acquaintances that he was dating someone new, a pediatrician who volunteered at the same charities he supported. Carol felt a pang when she heard the news, not of jealousy exactly, but of regret for what might have been if she'd been a different person. Mr. Black had discovered that he loved the restaurant business. After 30 years of dealing with tax returns and financial statements, there was something deeply satisfying about creating something tangible that brought people joy. He'd lost 20 pounds from all the physical work and claimed he felt younger than he had in years. And Mrs. Black? She'd found her calling. The restaurant gave her a platform to nurture not just her customers, but her community. She hired single mothers who needed flexible schedules, gave second chances to people with checkered pasts, and had become an unofficial therapist to regulars who came in as much for her wise counsel as for her famous pot roast. The story of Carol, Monet, and the engagement party that went wrong became local legend, a cautionary tale told in hushed whispers at country club lunches and charity galas. But for those who lived it, the real story wasn't about scandal or betrayal. It was about choices. Carol had chosen deception over honesty, greed over love, and manipulation over authenticity. Those choices had cost her everything she thought she wanted and taught her the difference between what she wanted and what she needed. Mrs. Black had chosen truth over comfort, integrity over convenience, and her principles over her relationship with her daughter. Those choices had nearly cost her that relationship, but ultimately strengthened it beyond anything she could have imagined. Monet had chosen to listen when the truth was offered, even when it was painful. He'd chosen gratitude over resentment and generosity over revenge. Those choices had saved him from a loveless marriage and opened his heart to real love when it came along. And Mr. Black had chosen to trust his wife of 30 years over the evidence of his own eyes, choosing faith in character over the appearance of wrongdoing. That choice had preserved his marriage and his family. In the end, the woman who had schemed to marry a millionaire ended up washing dishes for minimum wage. The woman who had risked everything to tell the truth ended up with her dream restaurant and a stronger family than ever. The man who had been deceived and humiliated ended up grateful for the experience that taught him the value of real love. And the man who had trusted his wife's character despite damning evidence ended up with a thriving business and a marriage stronger than ever. Sometimes the universe has a sense of justice after all. Sometimes the right choices are rewarded, even when they're the hardest ones to make. And sometimes, just sometimes, doing the right thing leads to exactly the right outcome. The moral of the story? The truth has a way of surfacing, integrity has a way of being rewarded, and love, real love, the kind built on honesty and respect, always wins in the end. But perhaps most importantly, never underestimate a mother who knows right from wrong, especially when she's willing to risk everything to defend it. Because sometimes the person who loves you most is the person willing to disappoint you most, if that's what it takes to save you from yourself. And if you ever find yourself in a steam room with your future daughter-in-law's mother, maybe call out "hello" before you sit down. Trust me on this one.